Thank you. I hope you were all patted down and groped sufficiently to get in here. Anybody here want to beat Hillary Clinton? Anybody here think to beat Hillary Clinton we shouldn't give up on what we believe in, that we ought to nominate a true conservative? Well, if you want to nominate a true conservative, first we got to figure out what it means to be conservative. I got involved and ran for office in 2009 as the Tea Party movement was welling up. I was coaching my son's baseball team and they said, "Come talk to a Tea Party." I said, "Okay." And I thought there'd be 20 people there. I live in a small town in Kentucky. 800 people were on the square. But you know what they're all concerned about? They're concerned about the debt. They're concerned about how much money we're spending that we don't have and that we could destroy the country. But you know who we were mostly concerned about? The Tea Party wasn't about Democrats. It was about Republicans that were doubling the debt. The last Republican administration, 8 years, went from $5 trillion to $10 trillion. Now we're going from $10 trillion to $20 trillion. But the question is, do you want to be the party that maybe adds debt just a little bit less slowly, but still doubles the debt? Or do we want to be the party that actually believes in more freedom, small government? As I say, a government so small we can barely see it. Is that who we are? Thank you. The Tea Party, there wasn't sufficient screening for that voice, I don't think. The Tea Party arose, though, because we were unhappy with big spending Republicans. We were unhappy with Republicans that voted to bail the banks out. We were unhappy with Republicans who doubled the size of the Department of Education. That's what we were about. That's what we rose up to. So we have to ask ourselves, what does it mean to be a conservative? We're having this debate. At the last presidential debate, you'll remember I brought it up. Is it conservative? I asked Senator Rubio, is it conservative to add $1 trillion worth of new debt? Well, he says it's for the military. I'm for a strong national defense. In fact, I think the primary purpose of the federal government is to defend ourselves. But if you're going to say that adding $1 trillion to the debt, even if you say it is for the military, if you think that's going to make us stronger, I disagree. I think the farther we go into debt, the less safe we become and the weaker we become. We need to be a strong nation that runs surpluses. We need to be a strong nation that can have a robust defense. But we get weaker and weaker and weaker as we borrow more money. We borrow $1 million a minute. And you say, well, certainly this is not Republicans' fault. No, you know whose fault the debt is? Do you know whose fault it is? Which party's responsible for the debt? Both. You've got people on the right who say they want unlimited military expenditures, but you have people on the left who say they want unlimited welfare. What happens? It's an unholy alliance. It's a secret handshake. They get together. Just a month ago, we raised the debt ceiling. Do you know how much we raised the debt ceiling? Infinity. It's unlimited. We raised the debt ceiling until March of 2017. We gave President Obama a blank check to spend as much money as he can possibly shovel out in his last year in office. But who put him up to it? Who passed this? Who raised the debt ceiling? Republicans and Democrats. Who was clamoring for it? On the right, they said, we want unlimited military spending. On the left, unlimited welfare spending. But the compromise is they got together and they raised both. The biggest threat to our national security is our debt. We could literally destroy our country. We have to decide and we have to think through how we're going to defend ourselves. People ask me, they say, what's the worst thing the president's done to the country? I say, how long do you have? But if I were to summarize it, I would say this. The worst thing the president's doing to the country is the collapse of the separation of powers. Our founding fathers were incredibly bright and brilliant and had great foresight, and they said that we would have co-equal branches of government. In fact, Madison put it this way. Madison said, we will pit ambition against ambition. The ambition of Congress to gain power would be pitted against the president to gain power. And they would balance each other. There would be an equilibrium. But that's been failing. But it's not just this president. It's been happening for 100 years. But you know what we have now? We have a president that is 1,000-fold more powerful than Congress. They're supposed to be equal. All of these crazy regulations that President Obama is putting forward, we don't even get a vote. I was elected by an entire state, but we have made Congress so insignificant that we are of less value, importance, and power than the most minor of bureaucrats. That's a disgrace. It ought to end, and you should demand that Congress stand up to the president. How would we stand up to the president? Well, we have the House, we have the Senate. We have the power of the purse, and we're not exerting it one iota. You know what I say? I would let all of the spending expire and start over. Let it expire. In Washington, you know what they say? They say, oh, you can't do that. It takes 60 votes to defund Planned Parenthood. Hogwash. Planned Parenthood expires at the end of the fiscal year like all spending. It would no longer exist if we would let it expire. And see, this turns the tables. When spending expires, the other side has to get 60 votes in the Senate to restart it. But you have to have courage, and you have to have courageous politicians, courageous statesmen who will stand up and let it expire. It's not just Planned Parenthood, although that is incredibly offensive. It's also about waste in general. It never gets fixed. We lump all of these bills together into an omnibus. It's going to happen next week in Washington. They'll ram it all into a bill. They won't read it. It'll be thousands of pages long, and no one will read it. They will vote on it, and the debt goes on and on and on. But see, the waste is everywhere. Do you know that the Defense Department spent $43 million on a natural gas station in Afghanistan? They don't even have cars in Afghanistan, all right? And the cars they do have don't run on natural gas. You think they've got enough extra money they're going to be going down to the mechanic and converting their car to natural gas? Mark my words, that gas station will rot, and within a year they'll be ripping out the copper tubing and selling it on the black market. This is a disgrace. If you want to defend your country, you must demand that we not waste money like that. Now, you're going to pick one of us. There's only 55 of us running, so you got a lot of choices. You're going to pick one of us, but I'm going to tell you why we need to make sure it's not Hillary Clinton who wins the presidency. In the 6 months leading up to the assassination of our ambassador, Hillary Clinton steadfastly and at every turn reduced the security. Team after team was let go. There was this idea that showing weapons was somehow offensive to the sensibilities of the freedom fighters in Libya. So they didn't want them to wear their boots, they didn't want them to show their guns, and they really just didn't want them there. So in the spring of that year, they asked for a plane in case there was an emergency. What did Hillary Clinton do? Turn down the plane. The same day or 2 days later, she approved an electrical charging station for Chevy Volts for the embassy in Vienna. So we got $100,000 to show how green we are to the socialists in Europe, but we don't have enough money for a plane to be flying around in Libya if we need it. That summer, she sent a 6-person special operations team home. In July, she sent another 6-person operations team, special forces team, home. In August, they sent 16-man security team home. Time after time, we were left defenseless. You know who was defending the embassy? You know who was defending Benghazi? The February 17th militia. You know what they were really doing? Taking pictures and scanning them for the terrorists so they could come and bomb us. All throughout that summer, though, you know what Hillary Clinton had enough money for? She didn't have enough money for security, but she had enough money to say, let's see, they spent $100,000 sending 3 comedians to India on the Make China Not War tour. They spent $700,000 on landscaping for the Brussels embassy. They spent $5 million, this is Hillary Clinton's State Department, spent $5 million on crystal barware, glassware for the embassies, but not a penny for security. So when she came before my committee, and I asked her this question. I said, Hillary Clinton, did you read the cables from the ambassador? Did you read the cables pleading for help, pleading for more security? Did you read the cables? And she acted all kind of put off, like it was just kind of beneath her and it was somebody else's job, and she said no. And you know my response to her? Hillary Clinton, by not defending the country, by not providing adequate security, by having significant dereliction of duty, Hillary Clinton should forever be precluded from holding office. To win again, we have to believe in what we believe in. In fact, I think we need to be more for what we are for than we have ever been before. I don't think we should dilute one iota our beliefs or our principles. I think we should be the party of low taxation, of less regulation, of balanced budgets. But we also need to be a party that not only energizes you, the base, but also does reach out to people. I've spent the last 2 years traveling the country and going places no Republican has gone in a decade or in a generation. I've been to the south side of Chicago, I've been to Ferguson, I've been to Baltimore, I've been to Philadelphia, I've been to Berkeley. And everywhere I go, I don't change the message, I still bring the message of limited government, but of a government that leaves us alone. But a government that is also a government that says to young people that you get another chance if you make a mistake. I think we need a message of hope. I think we need a message of opportunity. And when I think about that message, it has to energize the base, but it can't rely on just the base. We need new people in our party. We need young people in our party. We need people of color in our party. And when I think of what we need, I think of the painter Robert Henry, who said to other painters, to exhort younger painters, he said, paint like a man coming over the hill singing. And I like the image of that. Paint like a man coming over the hill singing. When I think of what our party should be, we need to proclaim with passion, with the passion of Patrick Henry, we need to defend and proclaim our support and our incredible support for the Bill of Rights, for freedom, for limited government. And I think when we proclaim our message with the passion of Patrick Henry, but when we proclaim our message also with the hope and optimism and the image of a man coming over the hill singing, then we're going to be the dominant party. We're going to rock and roll to victory, and I want to be part of that. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're not getting off that easy. Now, I've asked Senator Paul a million questions over the years. You've been on my radio program God knows how many times. We had a nice discussion backstage. So the first question for you is from Senator Joni Ernst.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for letting me join you remotely. My question for the 2016 Republican presidential candidates has to do with the EPA's reckless power grabs. As you may know, the expanded WOTUS rule, also known as the Waters of the United States, is the federal government's attempt to regulate about 97% of Iowa's land as they see fit, ignoring the fact that Iowans know best how to manage their own land. The EPA has completely ignored our farmers, small businesses, and manufacturers, creating confusion and more burdensome red tape. If you were president, what would your plan be to rein in this regulatory overreach?
Well, I'm a co-sponsor and helped Joni with her legislation to overturn the regulation that she mentioned. We introduced it and we actually passed it. Unfortunately, we have this little problem in the White House. And even though we were able to overturn his regulation in Congress, he will veto it, so it won't actually happen. But I wrote an entire book on this called Government Bullies, and how the government is invading our land. And with this regulation she mentioned, 97% of Iowa will be under federal control. I wrote in my book about a story of a man who went to jail for 10 years, and you know what his crime was? Putting clean dirt on his own land. They have interpreted the Clean Water Act to say that dirt is a pollutant. This is absurd, and we should stop them. And if I'm president, we will send most of the EPA's duties and regulations back to the state level.
We have a live question now. I'm not going to ask it. Stephen Moore, senior economic contributor to FreedomWorks, is going to ask it.
I'm not supposed to editorialize as a questioner, but my God, wouldn't it be an incredible improvement if we had Rand Paul in the White House over the guy we have right now? Can you imagine how much better this country would be? All right, Senator, here's my question for you. We have a Federal Reserve that has printed $4 trillion in the last 8 years. We've never seen anything like this in the history of our country. We're cheapening our currency. I would make the argument we're destroying our currency, and that once you've destroyed a currency of a country, you've destroyed that country's economic base. What would you do when you become president to make sure that we have a strong and stable dollar and that we're not putting so much power into these unelected bureaucrats like Janet Yellen?
The first thing we ought to do on day one is audit the Federal Reserve.
Yes! Woo!
I've been fighting this battle for 5 years on auditing the Federal Reserve, and I'll tell you what makes me the maddest. They are now using your dollars and the power that Congress gave them to lobby against transparency as to what they're doing. The biggest opponents of auditing the Fed are the Fed, which is crazy. So I've introduced a bill to make it illegal for them to lobby Congress. Most people understand that prices, freely fluctuating prices going up and down, are an important information tool to the marketplace. They tell whether you to build more, build less, expand or contract your business. Interest rates are no different. Interest rates are the price of money. And so if interest rates are kept too low, you get a false signal to the entire economy, keep building. Think of the housing boom. The Federal Reserve was responsible for the housing boom, but also for the housing bust. They must be reined in. We must do it now.
Good answer.
We have another question. Another video question. This is from an individual that I think everybody in this arena knows. He's a champion of working for a living and not assuming that the only way to make a living in this country is to go to college. Mike Rowe.
Hey guys, it's Mike Rowe. Last I checked, we have $1.3 trillion in student loans currently on the books. It's getting worse every day. And it seems like we're just lending money we don't have to kids who are never going to be able to pay it back to educate them in many cases for jobs that don't exist anymore. There are lots of other educational opportunities aside from a four-year degree, and my foundation focuses mainly on shining a light on some of those other alternatives, as well as calling attention to a couple million good jobs that currently exist that people aren't excited about pursuing. I'm wondering if anybody has a plan to change the conversation of what a good job is in the 21st century.
The first thing I would do is break up the monopoly of the Department of Education by eliminating it at the federal level. The second thing, instead of doing the Bernie Sanders thing, here's something for free, when there really is no free lunch, what we ought to do is first ask ourselves, why is the price of education so high? Think of the two things in the economy. Think of the two sectors of the economy where the prices rise more rapidly than any other sector. Healthcare and education. What do they have in common? The government. There is every reason to believe that if we would expand and open up and allow competition in higher education, that because of the internet and because of online courses, the price per pupil and the price per class should come down dramatically. But it doesn't. Look at your universities, even all the ones at the state universities here and in Kentucky and elsewhere. The price is the same whether you take an online course or whether you're there in brick and mortar. The internet has the ability to dramatically lower the price of the cost of secondary education, particularly for people who are going back to school. I was in Waterloo today in a barber shop, and his wife is getting a master's and going back to school. Her education should be 1/10 of the cost she's paying if we allowed the marketplace to bring the prices down. The other thing we can do is, instead of saying, hey, it's free, which really means someone you can't see is paying for it, but instead of making it free, I do believe we could make it tax deductible based on your work. So what I would allow people to do is not only deduct the interest, I'd let you deduct the principal and the interest over your entire working career, because going to college is a work expense, and I think ought to be treated as such and be deductible. And if we don't have any more questions, I guess this is where I sing. Oh, actually, my wife told me never to sing in public. She's heard me sing. So, are we done with questions, or what do we do?
Yes, we are. We have a little stage flow here.
My clock says 27 seconds. In my remaining 27 seconds, filibuster, short filibuster. What I will say is that I think to win, we need someone who attracts people across the party aisles, someone who is consistent and principled. But I think you have to self-examine yourself what it means to be fiscally conservative, and ask yourself, can we continue to say we're fiscally conservative when we have Republicans increasing the debt ceiling and having unlimited spending? You have to have someone who believes in cutting spending and holding a line across the board. I'm that candidate, and I hope you'll support me. Thank you very much. Thank you.